what's a piece of advice you'd give them about dealing with this unconscious bias?
So the advice I would give to women, and we do have a program called Elpreneur, and it's teaching women entrepreneurial skills for who are actually generally ex-corporate. I have met so many amazing women, and the lack of confidence. Even they have the most awesome job in senior roles and amazing capability. I myself also gone through that, and it was the confidence gap, as I call it, that gets in the way. So the advice is to.
All right, well, welcome to QuestX podcast. Today we have Sandra with us, and it's basically a very casual conversation that we just want to get to know about you, get inspired, inspire our audience, and share some of the experiences. But we always kick off with a bit of a game.
Oh dear.
And Tanya leads the game. She's worked it all out. So
So the game is 2 truths and a lie. So if you can tell us 3 things about you and hide from us which one isn't true, and we're going to try to guess what that is.
Oh, geez. I don't think I don't play poker for that reason. Okay. Okay. Let me. So 3 things.
Yes.
One of them is a lie.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So number one. Oh my God, this is really hard.
it's harder than you think, eh?
Okay. Okay, I'll try. So I'm the only child. I speak fluent Cantonese, and I was a financial controller at the age of 21.
Oh, that's a hard one.
I think it's the Cantonese isn't true.
The what?
Cantonese.
The Cantonese speaking Cantonese.
Yeah, that's true.
That is true.
That is. Can we interview in Cantonese? Yeah? I would say financial controller at 21 is it true? No. Sounds like a maybe true. I'll say it's true.
Yeah, it's true.
So
That's
you're
true.
not an only child.
No.
We're only child. There you go.
How many children in your family?
There's 4 in my family.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
And are you the oldest, youngest, or the middle?
I'm the oldest.
Ah,
Yes.
the wise.
The most responsible, the boring one.
The perfect child.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, there was a lot of pressure to be the role model for the siblings.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I was actually reading an article the other day, and it talked about the oldest child tends to be under a lot of pressure more than people actually think, because they always are held accountable for everything happens in the family. They always expected to look after the siblings. They always expected to look after the parents when they get older, and all these things which sometimes sets the oldest child to sometimes struggle throughout their life to be able to deal with all these things and then build their own career and their own their passion. What do you say to that? Given
Right,
that
I spend a lot of money investment in therapy. My parents were young when they had me, and so I guess parents in their 20s, living in Hong Kong. That's how I learned to speak fluent Cantonese, and then they had 2 more younger ones not long after me, so they made me responsible for it. So I was babysitting them from the age of 6. Kind of thing.
Wow.
And I think I realized that where I felt responsible for them was because my parents kept saying, like, you're the oldest, you're the smartest, you're educated, and you should be, make sure that they're okay, type of thing. And what I didn't realize how much of it was in subconscious, and literally in the last couple of years, that when I'm challenging, I guess, some of my beliefs, I realized where they stem from. So I don't blame my parents, I understood, and there's also the cultural aspect of it. Because my parents are from India, so immigrants in Hong Kong, and just trying to earn a living, all that sort of stuff, and so young kids, you just kind of make them just as responsible as adults.
And sometimes we talk about something that we believe in, and we end up doing it.
Yeah.
Like we believe that we shouldn't do something, and I've done that myself, to be honest, multiple times. We talk about something where we shouldn't do that, we should do this, and that's how it really should work. And then we go just do exactly what everyone else does.
Yeah, yeah.
And that can be just because we grew with that mindset, and it's just
Absolutely.
embedded so much in the
Yeah.
back of our heads that we just do it subconsciously. We don't even realize
Yeah.
that we're doing it.
And a lot of the work, I guess, what I'm doing now, helping women to also understand where that's coming from. So I'm not a psychologist, but I do appreciate how much the cultural norms, the society pressures about what a woman should do, gets into our subconscious, and it plays into the decisions and our actions. And unconscious bias is something I talk about, and I actually call it unintentional bias. It's from men as well. And so that is also from the upbringing of where it comes from schooling, from parents, from society. And we just don't realize how it influences all our actions and what we do.
Well, that takes us to maybe wanting to get to know you more.
Okay.
Because I know you believe significantly in gender parity. You're a strong advocate. You and I connected because we both stand for changing perceptions, to equality, to accepting others, to supporting others, that kind of stuff. But I think it's important for our audience to understand where you came from, how it all came about, and what do you currently do actually in a bit more depth so we can understand you a bit more.
Sure. So you want me to go through the whole life story, kind
Go
of?
through the life
Give
story.
me a monologue. Well, I mean, the hint is that being an immigrant in Australia, so I was born in Hong Kong, with come from very humble beginnings with my parents, and my dad just got a job in Canberra, and so we moved there, and it was a bit of a shock from 24/7 Hong Kong vibrant to in the mid-80s where shops closed at 12 o'clock on Saturday and no trading on Sunday. But we very much loved the Australian lifestyle, and I've adapted to that rather quickly. And then fast forward to leaving Canberra, moving to Sydney, and I was very fortunate that I was quickly promoted for a role in a international publishing company. I didn't study. I studied as a business in a business degree, but they hired me as an accountant. Well, I didn't start off as an accountant. It was in business, and they saw that I was very good with numbers and systems. And an opportunity came up to say, why don't you take on this role? And I said yes, but I had great mentors. They were very supportive. And I was 21, being a financial controller of a large business. So, and I did that. By the way, I felt comfortable doing that is because throughout my university, I had 2 jobs, trying to support myself since I was 17. And one of my job was working at the University Union Accounts Office. And they just trained me in every position because every week of the year somebody's taking a holiday, so I just would fill in. So I knew all of the functions very early on as part of the role, and so very lucky to build a career in finance. Spent 3 years in London as well. Got to work for really cool companies like EMI Records, MTV Europe, Diageo in the spirits side. And then came back and worked in media and IT industries mainly. Then in the early 30s, I had an opportunity. I did some entrepreneurial stuff. My parents were a little bit like that, talked about it, but I know how hard. I just thought, no, I'm going to be paid jobs, security. I'm not going to, go through the challenges that they've gone through. But then I kind of like dabbled in it, and I really liked it. And then 12 years ago, I just basically jumped ship and moved from a finance kind of like background, but I understood media and IT, and I started my own digital marketing agency, which was a bit crazy, and people say moved across to the dark side. And that grew internationally. Had offices in Singapore, Philippines, and Australia as well. And then it was acquired in 2018. And that was around the time, before that, by the way, since like for the last 20 odd years, I've also volunteered for an international NGO that advocate for gender equality. So, and they elected me as the state president, where I worked with the state government. Then I was appointed on the international board, and it's affiliated with the United Nations. So I got to really build an international network around gender equality and understood basically all the issues from grassroots all the way to international. And so when I sold the business, I thought I really want to create a business in gender equality. I didn't know what that was going to be, what that would look like. And so we were just kind of like, just evolving and working through. And it wasn't until at the end of 2021, early 2022, at the back of being part of the NASDAQ program. I think you may have seen my mugshot on the NASDAQ tower in New York Times Square, where there was some, that like I felt like I got credibility for the work I'm doing. But we did some research, and we looked at all the companies in the ASX and NASDAQ, and we rated them for things. We gave them a point, each company, using publicly available information. They get a point if they have a woman CEO or CFO. They get another point if they have a woman board chair. They get a third point if they have at least 25% women on boards, and another point for 25% women in C-suite roles. And if they get at least 3 points, we consider them committed to gender equality from the top. Now, we looked at over 10,000 companies by early 2022. Would you like to have a guess how many companies scored at least 3 points? Have a guess.
You looked at what, 1,000 companies?
10,000.
10,000 companies? 50?
50 companies that got at least 3 points.
Yeah.
That's very low. That's, you're saying that is 0.05%.
Is that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a number. What about you, Tanya? Sorry.
3%?
3%?
Yeah. 3 to 5?
Yeah, it was around 5%, less than 5%. It was like 400 and something companies, and which was a really low number, even in, like we thought in 2022. You hear about there's so much work being done to increase women on boards. We're talking about 20%, 30%. But when you combine with the leadership team, the numbers are really low.
So why is it important to have women in leadership roles, in your opinion?
Well, because that's where you actually start to see the company performing better. You see the inclusiveness from the top to the bottom. And by the way, I'm not saying like women are great, men are bad type of thing. It's about having a diverse team, and that you don't get the group thing, and that you think about all of the different perspective. And so, and research have shown that when you're looking at investing in companies, that women CEO companies that have women CEOs tend to perform better. But again, it's not a blanket rule. It's just that it's very hard to have women in leadership roles, and that's why I go on about it. And this is when I saw the stats, I just thought, well, what makes these 5% CEOs different to the rest? So I reached out to them and reached out cold and said, look, I'd like to interview you for my book. Wasn't expecting a lot of them said yes. And then I published a book around it. And the interviews, can I just say, I interviewed women and men who qualified for the criteria that we had, the 3 or more stars, or 3 or more points, I should say. And then we also developed Elect Stars as an accreditation to recognize this company. But what came out of it was that it didn't matter if they were man or women. It didn't matter if it was like a startup. So you have mining startups in ASX as well, to very large companies where they have 126 offices, like which is almost in every country in the world. It didn't matter if they were founding CEO or a CEO that was recruited in. It all came down to that they believed in gender equality. And then it just cascaded down. And so like what you were talking about, like, the values that you hold, the values that we hold, it's the CEO that champions it.
I agree. So I've sat in discussions in boards and others, and they said, okay, our next recruit has to be female. And then when they get presented with 2 portfolios, and the male could be probably the most suitable person, they still dismiss the fact that they're going to put the male, and they say we're going to choose the female just because we need to tick a box. And are you worried that this, because I agree with what you're saying 100%, it's just I think there's the narrative of putting it has to be a minimum 25% or that kind of narrative, it seemed to have in some cases pushing people to do it to tick the box of the 25% rather than actually having the right skills or targeting the right skills and the right qualifications. And that worries me sometimes because I've seen it happen where, and I met a lady, Julie her name was, and she said to me, I don't want to be chosen to tick a box. I want to be chosen because I am the best person for the job. How do you feel this have? Because I've seen that happening. I've seen it many times happen. Though,
Yeah.
purely to tick a box.
Yeah. And how many times have you seen people recruit in the role because they're mates or that they are part of the network?
Yeah.
You know, so it's just because quotas work and quotas help make change, and the reason help makes change is because they need to meet the quotas. And without the quotas, it's been discussed. Like we had the affirmative action since the 80s, and the gender gap is still there. And in 2022, the gender gap is still there.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. It's just there are a lot of focus. It's like, and I've had many of these discussions. My next door neighbour, as well as with various people that I meet, is that it's because the DEI program and the quotas are highlighting the candidates being performing, and you hire a woman or you hire somebody with diverse background, they have to be the best, and that if they don't be the best and they fail, to go, oh well, that's because they were the quota and that's because it is. But up until then, I know that I've been in corporate and been in many roles. A lot of people who were qualified, who got the role, was not because they were qualified, but most qualified. It was not because they were the best. It was because they were mates with somebody and because they know somebody. And 85% of really, I say the opportunities just come through network, and that is the main reason why how we hire like for like. And so that's what Coda's trying to disrupt, that change, and that's what causes a lot of people talking about it and highlighting the issue. And so
it's like a step to the right direction until we get to the point where...
I think the other thing that a quota does is it is a signal from a business that they're going to invest in diversity, whether that's women, whether that's people with disability, whether it's Indigenous people. I think it's a commitment that they're then going to put together training programs to develop people as they come in that might be from diverse backgrounds, and a commitment to educate them so that when they go for their job, it isn't all white men who apply for that leadership role. There is diversity in that because they've made the commitment within their business to foster that at all levels. So for me, it's not just looking at just the one person, man versus woman, going for a CEO's job. It's just too simplistic. It's really about the change of the organisation at all levels by making that commitment to 25% of women in our business or 25% at the board, to show everyone in the business that we feel that women are as equal, they have the same skills, and we're going to invest in their training so that we can meet that into the future.
Well, and by no means do I believe that we should set anybody up to fail just because of their diverse background and say, well, we have to tick the box, put you in, you're not really qualified, and then fail. They go, oh look, see, we tried, and that's it. You're absolutely right. That need to set the an environment so that they people generally exceed, and not just to have one person, you have more than one in the role. One of the interviews that I did for the book, there was a CEO who said, I asked him, like, how do you have a diverse team? And he basically said is that everybody assumes the CEO has all of the answers, and that the reality is that they don't have all of the answers. They rely on their leadership team to help them. And when he has a diverse team, he says he gets the best results. He gets the best advice. He gets the best way of how to manage a business.
The most well-rounded advice from multiple perspectives.
Correct. And not just everybody agreeing with him.
Yeah.
And so he that's his way of championing that. He did it because as a way of running a good business, not necessarily because about gender equality.
Yeah.
And another one quoted a book called Exponential Organization, and there's research to prove that diverse thinking do exponentially grow your business.
100%. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, so you have a female CEO of your group global group CEO.
Yes.
And without a doubt, Laura is amazing. Why was that a decision that you made around Laura? Was it just that she was the best candidate at the time? Did you think about diversity? Does it balance you out because you are male and she's female? Does it balance out the energy?
Look, my mindset is always, I need to be honest with myself about my skill sets and where I stand. For me to be able to lead my organization to success, I need to make sure that I understand where my gaps are. Laura, who's my group CEO, she is definitely the offset to that. She keeps me in check. She is very honest with her opinions, but she always has my back. I trust her like you have no idea. And that's very unique. Did I choose her because she was female? Absolutely not. I chose her because she is very good at what she does. And being female is a bonus because it comes with a lot of there's a characteristics in being a female leader that men leaders don't have, and Laura definitely offsets that for me completely. But she is a very trusted person. One of the things that I always talk about is the concept of inclusion, and you know my principle around that, Tanya. Basically, I don't like the language inclusion at all, because we tend to focus so much on inclusion that's the effect. But the cause is why is there exclusion in the first place? That's where the problem is. And we keep paying attention to companies having a policy around inclusion. We keep paying attention to companies having inclusion is important. Don't take it the wrong way. I'm just saying, let's tackle why is there exclusion. Females, for the purpose of this conversation, they are a fact of life. So I don't need anyone to include females. I just need them to stay out of the way. I don't need anyone to include me as a migrant. I need people to stay out of the way. I'm capable of finding my feet. I'm capable of delivering the outcomes. And females are capable of delivering the same outcomes as men. However, you just need the barriers taken away. So the focus should always be about the exclusion, and the focus should always be about why is there exclusion in the first place.
Yeah, and the barriers, like the exclusion, is because of the invisible barriers.
Yes.
And that's what we need to take away.
Absolutely.
And so that's where the quota, the inclusion policy, I think, do come into play. But I think what we don't have is a discussion about these invisible barriers. The number of discussions that I've had with people is like, oh, I treat everybody equally. I don't do anything different. So that's it. But nobody realised how much of the unconscious bias creates invisible barriers. There is those kind of like the systematic setup that has come from over the hundreds of years that we just don't realise are invisible barriers for people of diverse background. And what's been good is there is discussion about it. You know, I like that now there's a lot more awareness. If I say this sort of thing 20 years ago, I'll just be laughed at and not believed. It's like, no, there's no such thing, Sandra. But what is good now is that you're raising it, you're aware of it. You know, we're talking about it, and that is the first step of change.
I'm a big supporter. I mean, I rocked up to a Tanya Women in Leadership event, and I was the only man in the room. So that takes a lot of courage, trust me.
It does.
I did get ripped into in the room.
How do you?
I did.
Well, we
and it's not uncommon.
Yeah, no, we actually run Elect Women events where I bring in a male speaker, and I prep him because it's in a room full of all women, and they're C leaders or fairly, high up, and he's okay. But I do understand from a guy's perspective, it is actually, for guys, quite scary to be in a room full or be the only guy in the room.
I didn't know I was the only guy, but but the fact of it is, and I have been to many, and comedy, there's not a lot of men attend that, but also not a lot of men tend to speak. I mean, you said you brought a man speaking. I think that's powerful because the advocacy has to come from where the problem is, right? If I'm advocating, I mean, you brought Laura. If I'm putting Laura up, 75% of my leadership are females in my company, and I don't have a quota, by the way. We interview people, and the line of work we're in, just women tend to do it really well. But when I went there, my feedback was there should be men talking and advocating as well to say, hang on a second, I have a fantastic CEO that is a female, and she's good. Yeah. And that is I think the thought leadership that can change the narrative. So you and I can have these conversations, and you and I actually connected because we aligned a lot in our values.
Yeah.
But that's what happens. You start attracting people from the same mindset to lead the way of change, and that's how change happens. And hopefully you remove all the barriers in the middle, then it becomes an equal opportunity for everyone without any bias towards one gender or the other.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the thing is, I've been like conferences for 20 odd years. Used to be called Women Issues, not Gender Equality, and it was conferences of women with women speakers talking about these issues, and it just I got very tired of it. And so the reason why we bring in the male speakers is because it's the network. 85% of opportunities come from network. We need to tap into the boys' network. And I call it the boys' network. But the men, I talk to them, I vet them, because we want to make sure they're bringing the right energy, and other than also preparing for them. They are what I call male champions, because they get it. They understand it. And the way that you operate, Yasser, you're actually in the minority. Like the research that I've done, you're in the less than 5% of CEOs who think like that. So what may seem normal to you, it's not normal.
Actually the general. I started to pay attention to that more with people like yourself, bringing that up to surface. I did it completely, and I would say upbringing plays a big part of it. I grew up in a family that females had a voice, and my sister is really good at what she does, and she's a fighter, and she gets out there, gets the job, and we just grew up in that kind of mindset, And actually, I would like to hear your comments around it. Does upbringing play a big part of it? Because to me, I think that's what played a big part of it. Like, I grew up in a family that females are leaders. My mom was a lawyer, and my mom was a lovely, sometimes I say very naive person, because she's just the world is so perfect in her eyes, literally.
It's beautiful.
And I always tell her, like, were you a good lawyer? Like, because she's just not aggressive, she's not rough. Because it's an assumption that you're meant to be like that. And I think the female touch to this is like, no, you don't have to be aggressive to get things done. You just have to be assertive and aware of what you're doing and confident. But upbringing plays a big part of that.
Yeah, part of the interviews that I do, like I did for the book, I asked some background information, because I also wanted to see what are the similarities. And some of the conversation, the CEOs talk about their daughters. They said that they wanted the world to be a lot better for them, because they worry about that. They also talk about their upbringing. So some examples was the home life that gave them, like, and also they have sisters as well, strong mothers. So it all varied quite a bit, but certainly it's a combination of upbringing, but also the future they see for their daughters. Influence how they want to run the company, or to be the person that they are with the values. But I certainly don't think that less than 5% of CEOs only have an upbringing with strong mothers, or that they have sisters. So there are other factors that I'm sure that plays into it. And maybe one day, if I feel like doing a PhD in this, that could be it. I haven't quite figured it out, but I do believe having conversation, like I'm quite open, like us having a discussion. I talk to a lot of conservative men, and we have very frank discussions. We do not agree each other, but what is important is that we are hearing each other. I don't shut them down. I don't call them imbeciles or want to punch them in the face when they have very Trump-like views. I ask them, why do you have these views? And listen to them. And then it gives me an opportunity to be listened to as well, and we have very frank conversation.
I think it's very generational in many respects. So I think family is one really important part of that. But our family obviously operates in a larger ecosystem where society norms have a huge impact on that. It's interesting you talk about daughters and sisters. I have 3 sons and then a daughter who came later. And when I was raising just 3 boys, I was really clear that I had to be a role model of how you treat women. And in my house, I am the queen. There is no doubt. They can't sit down till I sit down. I get served my dinner first. Like, they treat me very well, because we needed to really role model how boys become men. And I've always seen it as, I'm raising men for the future, and I want them to treat all women with respect. Nothing would be worse for me than to hear that my son was abusive to their girlfriend, or talk down to a woman, or whatever that would just be very devastating for me. But then I had a daughter, She's just turned 4. And when she was born, for the first time, I actually went, wow, there is actually all of this unconscious bias. I'd always been so much advocating for my sons that I never saw it from a woman's perspective. And obviously, I've sat on boards where I'm the only woman. I've been employed as the only woman. I probably have been employed to tick a box a few times. And I have experienced that myself, but it wasn't until I had a daughter that I actually went, wow, this is something I really need to champion in my business. And how can we do this? How can we make sure that my daughter knows that it's not okay for her to be treated differently? And even in our house, you know, there's some things girls and boys do differently, but having to talk that through with her, and she'll be like, well, the boys get to do it. And obviously they're 10 years older than her, so they do different things because of age, that's safety, but trying to always not let her brother say, well, you're a girl, you can't do that. And being really clear with, well, she will do it when she's 10 or when she's that old. She will be able to do it, just not just right now. So it's interesting. I guess my question for you around all of the work that you do around gender parity is really what kind of advice you would give to someone who's starting out as a woman in business, whether it's a leadership role, whether it's starting their own business. What's a piece of advice you'd give them about dealing with this unconscious bias?
So firstly, I think it's amazing you have 4 kids and doing what you're doing. So that shows how a strong, amazing woman that you are.
No,
so I just wanted
thank you.
to acknowledge that. So the advice I would give to women, and we do have a program called Elpreneur, and it's teaching women entrepreneurial skills for who are actually generally ex-corporate, and it's not just about starting their own business, but they can use these skills for leadership role as well. And what I have found, I mean, I think I'm like a yeser, like I didn't let anything stop me. I've been the oldest. I just thought, well, you know, if he can do it, I can do it, that sort of stuff, and just did it. But then later on, when, you know, came across all the various challenges, but I myself didn't allow that to stop me. What I found is that not all of the women think that way, because the limiting beliefs are quite strong. I have met so many amazing women, and the lack of confidence. Even they have the most awesome job, in senior roles and amazing capability. I myself also gone through that, and it was the confidence gap, as I call it, that gets in the way. So the advice is to believe in yourself and have faith in yourself. The second thing, which I didn't realize made such a big difference, was the encouragement I got to build a community, the Elect Women community, and that started off really as part of a business growth. And I guess I put my values and my kind of like energy into it, and I said, this is a community for strong and kind women. Because from the 90s, in terms of the career, being kind is a sign of weakness, being nice is a sign of weakness, and so I had to be a different type of person in my early career. But what I realized that it's not a sign of weakness, it's just, you know, it's important to keep that. And we tend to wear a mask to hide that. And so what was really important in this community is to not to have a mask, to be yourself, and to have that strong and kindness as something that you wear proudly. What I didn't realize is that the encouragement I got from that, the support I got from that, has really improved my confidence, has really helped. You can see the growth in the business is because the amazing network. And I kind of like really get the boys club, like how well that works, and wanted to bring that in and how we're really supporting each other. So I would also tell the advice is, do not feel like you have to do this on your own. You know, tap into a community that can really support your career journey. And so those two would be the biggest advice I would give.
Yeah, I love that.
I want to add something to this actually. So an observation that I had, right? So I'm exposed quite significantly to these type of discussions of equality, right? Generally, because I advocate for people with disability, I advocate for aged people, and I'm definitely strong advocate for females and leadership in the female world. But a lot of the times I attend business functions or business networks, and then I suddenly find that majority are men. But none of these men had any say into it. It's just a lot of women are not pushing forward to get to these places. Whether it can be an intimidation, I don't know. Might be if you walk in a room, there's like 50 men sitting and you're the only female. That might be something. I'm not quite sure actually. But I also would say, and maybe it's an advice to a woman, if you don't get out there And if you don't start being present, and if you don't start contributing to these type of forums, then these men are not going to learn that women can do it and sometimes can do it better, all right? And it's not about the gender is what makes a difference. It's about the capabilities, and everyone can have equal capabilities. Because I've seen it many times. I attend, and I'm like, I look around the room, and I'm like, majority are men, and there's no real reason, because none of these men had a say in who attends.
No.
They're just attendees.
Completely agree with you. And so when I wanted to kind of embark on this business with Elect, I didn't want it to be another leadership program. Women don't need fixing, and not another networking event. It is to tackle those sort of challenges that prevents women accessing the opportunities. It's also, it comes into a little bit of the unconscious bias, but also what I call the gender coding in us. And I'm very much generalizing, I just wanted to say, but what I'm going to give you some example. So you're absolutely right, is that women are not very good at networking. And so you have a lot of women networks, which is a little bit more comfortable. When you go to mix, what happens, and this is again generalizing, is that men tend to talk most of the time, or talk over, or interrupt. And women, that research have shown a lot of that, and it becomes an environment that's not conducive or easy for a woman. Again, generalizing, but research has backed that. And so that is the purpose of Elect Women event, is to make the networking easy, coming out, and we're doing it also online in addition to in person. And that's why I bring the male speakers in, the male champions, as I call them now, is to make it easy for both to connect and then tap into each other's network. So we push a lot of that around, and we're going to roll out a platform to make it a little bit easier, but very much is to tackle that. Because when I do mentoring, and I kind of like, I remember talking to a CFO last year, and she was saying like, I'm really struggling, and I wanted to try get on boards and things like that. And I said, well, you need to start going networking. And she goes, networking? You mean I have to talk to people? To talk to strange people? I don't know what to do. And she's an absolute capable, confident CFO. But networking is not a natural thing to do for a lot of women. And so this is our way of trying to tackle it. And like you said, other networking events is not designed to exclude women. There is no, intention of that, but that's where the unintentional bias comes in, because the environment is not conducive to include women.
Yeah, so it's not that women aren't invited in those rooms, but the woman is the one dropping the kids at school and can't make it. They're the ones that can't do a dinner event because their husband is travelling, so they're holding the fort down. It's all those societal norms that make it really hard for women to get to those events. So I think I would challenge your unconscious bias a little bit there and say, you often challenge me of saying that I don't understand, the impact of being a migrant because I was born in this country, and that I take that a little bit for granted. And I think it's kind of the same for women. I think for a man, the whole environment of business is set up for a man. Everything in that whole place is set up to work. Even the fact that we work an 8-hour workday, that works around the flows of testosterone in a man's body. A woman's cycle is over 28 days. We peak and flow. So really, if work was to be set up for a woman, we would have, in a 4-week of a month, we would have a week we worked really hard, a week would reflect, a week we would rest, a week would go hard. But our whole world is set up around the patriarchy, around men, and so those environments are harder to crack into. Not impossible, but you do need to be incredibly confident and incredibly sure of yourself. And maybe thinking back, I've been networking and sat on boards since I was in my early 20s, probably because I'm the only child of a single mother. So my only role model was a woman working really hard. And as a night shift nurse and a nurse on the wards, there was no other role models to say that I couldn't, because my mum did all those things. I went into every room being like, I didn't really realise that women weren't there until I looked around and realised that I was given opportunities. Oh, you're a woman. Yeah, put Tanya on the board. She's a woman. And many of my first board or committees that I was part of in the education space, I was in my 20s. Most people were in their 40s, 50s or above, definitely the only woman. And they would be like, oh, there's a female here. Can you go and get the coffees? Can you take the minutes?
Yes.
And in the beginning, I was like, well, yeah. okay, that's my role here. I'll be the secretary. And when they started after many years, in the beginning, I just wanted to learn from these amazing people. So I took the opportunity. I welcomed other women onto the board. When people were saying, oh, who should be the next person on here, I would be like, I know 3 women who would be really great. And over time, we were able to shift that. And I moved out of the secretarial role. But if that got me in the room, I was happy to do it. Where maybe other people's mindset would have been, oh my God, they asked me to get the coffees. Oh, I can't go back in that room because they think I'm stupid. I was like, oh, I'll play the dumb one. That's fine. I'll let them think they're smarter than me. I'll learn everything I have. I'll learn everything they've got to give me before I leave that room. And so I think it's thinking through how we set up structures, especially, you know, I know that you're not big on working from home, and in disability it doesn't make a lot of sense. But the increase or the access to things when you can do things from home for women really do mean you don't have to choose between family and work anymore. Where I can imagine 20 years ago, it would be almost impossible to spend time with your child and work and run a business. So I think society's shifting, you know, and lots of things are shifting, but I think it's not always that the woman just has to do better at getting out there, but how do we make it easier for them to access? The same as disability is true, right? Yeah. We always say in disability, it's not the ability that's disabling, it's the physical environment that's not built for them. And it's very much the same for women.
So 2 things I want to actually maybe discuss
well
here.
Done.
Yeah, well, Tanya is a great advocate, so trust me. And I have a lot of respect for Tanya, she knows that. Working from home for me is not a no-go. Just to know, I am not a supporter of working from home because our environment requires a lot of physical attention to the people we support, right? You can't support a person with disability from a computer.
And the same with retail.
And
so that all restaurants.
Correct. You need to be physically present. Yeah. But we do have, when a female had a situation with, you know, having to look after the kids at home, we adjust the environment to make sure we cater for that. But what I really want to put on the table, when did it go wrong? Because history says that female leaders were always at the forefront. So if you go to the pharaohs, my background, the queens were a thing. Right? There was a lot of queens, Cleopatra being a very famous one, Hatshepsut is another famous one, right? So leadership was always around females. If you go in history, even in the England history of England, there was a lot of female queens. And if you go to the Spanish leadership, there's a lot of Spanish queens. When did that shift? Because history, I'm talking about pharaohs now, 3,000-4,000 years ago, females led the world. Pharaohs were one of the most powerful culture in the world, completely led by females. In our history, which I studied significantly, in our history, a lot of the great things were done in Egypt were done by females. The Roman Empire, touch and go, and I think they might have had a bit of influence in that, maybe. I don't know. I don't have the historical facts behind that. But when did it go wrong that we shifted away from female leadership? And you said the days and the work and everything is designed around men. Historically, it wasn't like that, right? It shifted away. And
Westernization.
I think
is that what it is?
Industrial age. So Christianity, perhaps. And by the way, I'm no expert on this as well, but I do. Okay, I'll just with my personal opinions. So it's not based on research and things like that. I do, and I'm Catholic, so also saying that Christianity with all the male leaders. When you think about the priest, the post, the Pope and bishops and cardinals. I mean, if you look at what's happened at the Pope and you look at the TV, all you see are male leaders still in 2025. I do believe it plays into this, and I remember reading some research around the 60s when the gender toys or something around the toys on that had to do with gender managed to shift boys and girls away, like from who were equally interested in computing to only boys interested in computing. I don't have the details of that, and I can't remember.
The commercialization and money making, it's always big money, right? So Mattel and their Barbie, it's very influential. They were the ones that made pink for girls and blue for boys, was Mattel. They designed that. Before that, both colours were equally enjoyable by both.
Yeah, and I think, and there was research to show that around that time, whatever the education or whatever the influence that came about, it was the boys who got into the computing and made it harder for girls to come into. I can't remember the reason why. And like I said, it's a personal opinion, and I'm not an expert on that, but I think that contributed towards the shift of it as well.
It's just if we recognize where the shift came from, and if we recognize that it wasn't always like this, and we try and find out where it went wrong, then we could eliminate the barriers a bit better and create a sustainable future. Because in my opinion, and that's again my personal opinion, it was very female-led. Then maybe men said, that was too female-led, we need to step up. And then this is shifting the narrative completely. And that disrupted the balance. And now, if we're not paying attention to this, we don't want to re-disrupt the balance again, and then history repeats itself. What we want is a substantial and sustainable changes that then cater for the change and the equality forever, rather than it becomes waves of changes. Continuous, because history tends to do that, right? It's waves of changes constantly.
I think I hear what you're saying, and again, very much like awareness helps, people understand, and that whole unconscious bias, and naming it was something that got people to think. And I read the Dan Brown book, so it talked about the era of goddesses, as well, and then how that shifted. So I know that's fiction, but I guess some of it is based on history. But but going forward, let's say we are seeing with DEI, against DEI, all that sort of stuff. I think ultimately is what Tanya have said earlier, is that we got to recognize the work environment. When you look at the research, it makes it really hard for women to progress. And if you look at research, university graduates are an equal measure. It's sometimes in some areas is 60% women, 40% men. And as they progress through the career, you see kind of like this cross. And why is it? And it's because it's around the childbearing and what happens. And having a career and having a family is in this sort of setup it's virtually impossible for a lot of women. And I guess that's where that needs to be kind of like addressed. Do you know, just 18 years ago, I had to make a decision. And this is just 18 years ago, and actually it's kind of like my speech I do sometimes in events. And I had to make a decision whether I want to have a family or a career. I was in my early 30s, and I decided I chose. I hadn't met my current husband then, but I was single. I was in my early 30s. I thought, what do I do? Do I go for it, or do I really think about having a family? And I just thought, you know what? I'm not going to have a family because I really want to have a career. So that was just 18 years ago. And it was just then, and then I met my husband. I said, oh, you're too late. I decided to be single for the rest of my life. But he very much believes in equal household. And I'm so lucky that he does that, because, as you know, I have a daughter with severe disabilities, physical disabilities. So we both make it work. And but that was something just 18 years ago to me was not a possible option. Just a regular family.
And I agree. It's crazy that a woman should have to choose that choice, because family are important and careers are important, and often our careers deliver good family and good outcomes. Like you want the income, you want the status, you want the self-confidence that your kids can then take from and build on, and it's important. And I do agree that females tend to have setbacks in their careers, and if we're not paying attention to these setbacks, then they end up missing the boat a little bit, or maybe catch up a bit later, because even in age, I've looked into that before. I don't have the numbers, but younger CEOs tend to be more men than females, because females a lot of the times miss out on a period when the childbearing and all that kind of stuff. And if you have 4 kids, that's almost maybe 3 to 4 years of your career on hold, really, or slow down.
13 years.
Okay.
13 years from start to finish.
As a minimum.
Long.
But that's a massive setback, because in that time, someone else would have just went ahead, while you might have graduated at exactly the same time. And
I just want to add, I don't mean to do all the talking here, but even in the last 15 years, just say, I've had conversation where I've seen a situation where if a woman takes 6 months maternity leave off, she would come back to struggle to even come to her role or end up being in a lower role. But if a man takes 6 months sabbatical and travel, come back, easily promoted. So there is also additional stigma when a woman becomes a mother who's working as well.
That's crazy. I didn't have that. But
I had the CEO where I was working. I'd built his business to a very large business, had my first child. He asked me to come back early because we had some issues in the business, so I came back when my son was about 4 months old. And he said to me, look, I'd like to make you, I think I was general manager at the time, I'd like to make you COO, but I know you're going to have another baby, so I'm not going to do that yet unless you tell me you're not. And I had no idea. I just had a brand new baby. I had no idea what he was saying. And then after I'd been there a few more years, he said to me, I'm going to promote you to a figurehead, but I don't think that a woman can be a CEO. So you can have COO, or you can be chair of the board, but I don't believe women can actually run companies. And I had grown his business from 0 students to very large business, a multinational company, and he was not involved in the process. And that's when I decided to leave that role and start my own business. I had run my own businesses in the past, but I had decided that that was the linchpin. And when I resigned, he said to me, check with your husband first. And I was like, have you met me? Like, I don't understand. We'd worked together for 8 years, and to have that level of, one, I don't want you having another baby because that disrupts my life, and two, come back to work early to save me because we can't do without you for 4 months, but we can't promote you even though you're the best option. And then actually we're going to get a man to run the fort so people feel like we're a serious company because women can't run things, but you're actually going to do the work and just not get, one, paid for it, or two, the recognition, was just completely demoralizing to me. And I don't think I could do any of the things I do now by working with somebody else, because every organization I've worked for, you hit a ceiling where you can't get further as a woman because they make you make too many choices and compromises.
And that's the reality, is that again, unconscious bias from workplace, is that a woman can't be a leader and a mother at the same time.
Yeah.
I think the hardest job on earth is being a mother.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
I genuinely, I totally failed personally. And I honestly, it's not an easy task to keep the balance right.
Well, do you know, I also wanted to add what needs to change is also fathers being allowed to have parental leave and to be more with the kids. So I came back from DC a couple of months ago, and there was a speaker, and there was actually a male panel, and it was a diversity conference, by the way. But they invited a panel of men, as well as a speaker who runs men's program. And you talk about your 3 sons, there is kind of like a little bit of a identity crisis for men, because we're advocating for women to be stronger and speak for themselves, but men don't know where their position should be. And parents say, look, I'm encouraging my daughter, but I don't know what to say to my sons. And so the men that were in the room and on the panel basically said they want to spend more time with their kids. They worry about it affecting their career. They worry about taking parental leave would not allow them to progress in their career. All the challenges that women have, men are also experiencing that. And in Australia, I think parental leave has a take up of about 13%, which is really, really low. So if we can encourage men to be active fathers and to have flexibility and to also take time off to be with their children, that will significantly change things as well.
And that's what gender parity is about. It's not just that women need things. It's actually that it needs to be equal for both to be able to do that.
Does this mean the government needs to step up a little bit? Because I think that the policies around a female going into...
They're getting better.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's definitely direction there, but I think there's a bit of work to be done.
So there are legislations in place for larger companies to be able to offer that. The smaller businesses, it's a little bit harder, but it's the men. It's that culture thing. It's the unconscious bias. It's men are not taking up the parental leave, and you can't force them. It's there. It's available. Even companies offer that. It's because they are worried that they won't get the promotion. They're worried they're not being seen to be serious about their career. And they're also, may still be in a provider role. And so they have to work the long hours. They can't pick up the kids from school. And all that responsibility falls on a woman, even if she's working and having a full-time job. So we can shift that where men are allowed to have flexible environment, to work from home, to be with their kids, to pick up the kids, to take them to appointments. However, that structure not just reserved for women, you will see that gender gap reduce.
Yeah. Well, it's always good to see advocates that believe in the cause in a very fair way, and I always say you're one of these people that you're very fair about your approach. So you don't want one extreme over the other, you just want the right balance so the world can move forward and grow and progress. And I've always seen that, and I love it. Thank you very much for being part of QuestX. It's a passion conference, and you being part of it is definitely a privilege. Tanya, any final words?
No, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Can I just say thank you for inviting me here, and I really enjoyed talking to both of you.
Oh, thank you.
Always a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks.